Good afternoon, everybody. We're going to get started in about 2 minutes. We're going to wait until right at 1 o'clock to let everybody get logged on. Okay, well, let's get started for the day. Dawn, if you want to advance to the next slide.
You
Is
won't
it
believe
doing
this,
it?
Angela is doing it again. Oh, there we go. All right, thank you everyone for going through our technical challenges, which we had already practiced, but looks like the show is on the road.
It always happens. We test and test and test, and then the live thing comes and something messes up always. Anyway, good afternoon. I'm Angela Barger, the ESI Program Manager, and I want to welcome you back to the DEQ Environmental Stewardship Initiative's ISO 50001 Overview webinar. We did the first half of the standard yesterday, and so we will be completing that today. You'll be hearing from myself. You'll also be hearing from Don Burke and Davey Connors, who are both coaches with our ESI program. And the three of us are typically the ones who are teaching on environmental management systems, but since we've had so much interest from our members in the past couple of years on energy management systems and the ISO 50001 standard, we decided to develop this 50001 overview class. We also need to be sure to thank our partners, Atlanta Sky Regional Council and the Waste Reduction Partners, for helping us with providing the software that we use when we do these webinars, and also with their assistance on energy audits and other technical services that they offer. All right, next, Don. I do have a few housekeeping things before we dig into today's topic. Again, if you have audio issues and are using the audio through your computer, you can switch to your telephone. You just go to the audio tab in the webinar controls box and click the phone, and you'll get a phone number and a code. That information is also in the webinar invite email that you got, and also the reminder email that you got today. We are recording today's session, and we'll post those recordings and copies of the slides to the ESI events page. There is a previous version already there. So if you can't make a session or you'd like to hear something again that we talked about today or even yesterday, feel free to go and pull that up. We do have a couple of items in the handout section again. One of those is a PDF of the combined set of slides from yesterday and today, and the other is a tool for performing a gap analysis of your progress towards implementing an ISO 50001 standard that one of our interns put together last summer. All right, next on. We have everyone currently muted in order to prevent feedback and to eliminate unintended background noise. Therefore, we just ask that you submit questions using the questions function on the control panel. If you need to add clarification to a question, you can use the hand raising function. If you click on the attendee menu, you should see your name, and next to it should be a little hand symbol. If you click on that, it sends us a notice that you would like to speak, and then one of us can unmute you and recognize you so that you know that you're good to go. And that's all I've got on the housekeeping stuff. So we'll just start digging in. Don, I think you're up.
All right. Thank you for joining us today, everyone. And we're going to lead off with support and operation. That's section 7 of ISO 50001. So let's go ahead and jump in feet first. Now, this section covers key requirements are needed to implement an energy management system with reference to resources, competences, awareness, internal and external communication, and the documented information. So the standard states in 7.1, the organization shall determine and provide the resources needed for establishment, implementations, maintenance, and continual improvement of energy performance and the energy management system. Now, resources can include human resources, specialized skills, technology, data collection, infrastructure, and financial resources. So the bottom line is the ENMS must be properly resourced. Now, a quick example of this, say you finally got that thermal imaging camera that you always wanted, right? You had to work on upper management for the finances. These things aren't cheap, as we know sometimes. You had to make sure the budget was in place. Then once you get it, and by the way, this is part of our energy toolkit that ESI is putting together, and we hope to talk about this later on in the presentation as well. But once you get equipment such as this, what do you do with it? You don't want it to sit on the shelf for a year or 2 years or 3 years, right? You need to get staff trained, okay? So the resources must be in place to be able to train upon equipment such as that. That falls under specialized skills for that technology, for that data collection, okay? Because the financial resources were made available. So it's something to keep in mind. Now, what could components like this help you with? Well, items we talked about yesterday, your energy reviews, your energy audits, expansion of manufacturing lines, for an example. You may have new equipment that come on place for your processes. So you may want to acquire those new energy baselines. Okay, this will help with your energy performance indicators, as mentioned yesterday. And also, it's that baseline will set up for you for success on determining that new equipment and processes in place, the manufacturing lines, et cetera, what changes are being made. So you may be able to adjust your goals with that as well. Now, continued, ensure that your organization has determined and provided the resources needed for the establishment, implementation, maintenance, and continual improvement of your management system. Check that your organization has identified which resources it needs to make available in order to ensure the effective operation of your energy management system. So these resources will often include your raw materials, as I mentioned, infrastructure, the finances, personnel, and of course, IT. We actually have some new tablets that we're working with IT for some field work for our staff. Right? All of which can be either internally or externally provided. Now, in order to operate the energy management system, there are a variety of resources required, which can include, as I mentioned, specialized skills, HR, et cetera. But the bottom line with this is you need that buy-in from top management. That is essential, as ultimately they have the decision to deploy or invest in the resources for your energy management system. So in 7.2 competence, the organization shall determine the necessary competence of persons doing the work under its control that affects its energy performance in the ENMS. Right? It ensures that these persons are competent on the basis of appropriate education, training, skills, or experience. And where applicable, the organization shall take actions to acquire the necessary competence and evaluate the effectiveness of the actions taken. And the organization shall retain appropriate documented information as evidence of competence. Now, applicable actions can include, for example, the provision of training to, the mentoring of, or the reassignment of currently employed persons, or the hiring or contracting of competent persons. So competence requirements should be appropriate to the function, level, and role of persons, including top management, doing work which affects energy performance and the energy management system. Competence requirements are determined by your organization. Now, training alone may not be sufficient to demonstrate competence. This must be demonstrated through tests, observations, results. Auditors need to find objective evidence in order to determine that the competency requirements have been met. And if the people are found not to be competent, your organization is required to take action. The actions taken need to be evaluated for effectiveness in raising competence to the required level. Examples of action may include remedial training, recruitment of the use of external people in order to acquire the necessary competence. Right? So again, we're developing an energy toolkit. We may not know all the ins and outs of this new equipment. So yes, we can reach out to external organizations to actually train our ESI staff. And with that, as we loan this equipment out, we can share that information and assist our ESI members when they check this equipment out, okay? So competences, determining the level of competence required to fulfill requirements and other performance measures and ensuring competence of those involved, including your training as required. With this, creating a training needs matrix based upon what competency or awareness is required amongst organizations' employees will highlight when competency has been achieved or it is required. Okay, so document this. Okay, it's justification. You can confirm, or who's ready to hit the floor, running, or who needs to be maybe take a step or two back and go over some training events. So just for an example, we talked about energy toolkit, but if it's been identified that there's a need to undertake an energy assessment of air conditioning equipment on your property, then there needs to be appropriate competency and resources to carry that particular function out. Are any questions so far? If not, I'll move on to 7.3 awareness. So persons doing work, real quick, we discussed this yesterday too, but a quick reminder, persons doing work includes in-house staff, temp staff, vendors and contractors, anyone coming on your property doing work. So persons doing work under the organization's control shall be aware of the energy policy as mentioned in 5.2, their contribution to the effectiveness of the energy management system, including achievement of objectives and energy targets, as in 6.2, and the benefits of improved energy, the impact of their activities or behavior with respect to energy performance. Okay, they do have an impact every time they come onto the property, go to work. They're involved in their shift, and the implications of not conforming with the energy management systems. So you have your highs and your lows as far as impacts go, and people need to understand that. So you should seek evidence to confirm that this requirement of awareness has been applied by your organization to ensure that people who need to be made aware now include all the people who work on your organization's behalf that affect the conformity of your organization's energy management system or products. You ensure that these people are aware of the quality, the energy that we're talking about today, environmental, as in 14,001, and or health and safety policies. How about their contribution to the effectiveness of the energy management system? Benefits of improved performance, everybody wins. Or the implications of not conforming to that energy management system requirements. The awareness training does not need to follow the format of long, drawn-out classroom sessions. Training techniques can include short training segments and supplemented with videos and hands-on demonstrations that address key elements of the ELMS. Whoop, got one, ENLMS. Other methods to promote and reinforce the health and safety awareness training sessions include communication via electronic bulletin boards, posters, newsletters, informational meetings. I know many of us have gone to Microsoft Teams. Oh, what Teams has made available often goes untapped of those elements of communication within an organization. So the bottom line of this is to engage your staff. Okay, you've got a thought process in your mind. You want to relay that to theirs. Okay, engage your staff, capture their attention, get them excited about this, and make sure they know that they do indeed have an impact day in, day out. And again, if anyone has any questions, just feel free to interrupt me. In 7.4 communication, the standard states that the organization shall determine the internal and external communications. Okay, internal and external, we'll talk about both, communications relevant to the energy management system, including on what it will communicate, when to communicate, with whom to communicate, how to communicate, and who communicates. That's very important. We'll talk about here in just a second. So this relates again to both internal and external communication. And this ensures that relevant and appropriate information is communicated. A process is needed so any persons doing work under the organization's control can make comments or suggestions to improve the ENLMS or to energy performance as a whole. So when establishing your communication process or processes, the organization shall ensure that information communicated is consistent with the information generated within the ENLMS and is dependable. The organization shall establish and implement a process by which any persons doing work under the organization's control can make comments or suggest improvements to the ENLMS and to energy performance. And this one, I chuckle a little bit, and Angela and Davey, if you have any input on this one, feel free. But the organization shall consider retaining documented information in 7.5 of the suggested improvements. That's pretty subjective, isn't it? Shall consider retaining documented information. So something I believe Davey mentioned yesterday, eventually you may need to validate or justify these actions or improvements for an audit, and not only an audit, but even to upper management. If this is an internal process that you need to justify this program. So me, knowing my background and my tendencies, and again, not all organizations are cookie cut. We respect that. So, this is a very subjective statement here. The organization shall consider retaining documented information. If you consider it, great, but just keep in mind your justifications and your validations later on. Okay. And I did research that even further, but the standard has no further guidance for that one statement. So they're leaving it up to you. Examples of internal communications include communicating energy objectives and targets to employees, okay? Raising their awareness of energy issues, all right? Communicating the energy policy to employees. So communicate it to them. Now, do they know where it is? Do they understand it? Can they explain it to you in their own words? It doesn't have to be verbatim or word for word, but can they give you a general explanation of it? Advising of non-conformance to relevant departmental heads so they can be aware, be on the lookout, look out for any of these negative trends that may occur. And the reporting incidents arising from abnormal or emergency operations to senior management. Okay, make sure they're aware of this so it can be addressed. So, resolution. Examples of external communications include dealing with energy and or environmental complaints, or proactively inviting such stakeholders or green pressure groups to the site. I've been involved in these in the past, especially with problem sites that I've used to visit, et cetera, and help them through their problems. And at the end, guess what? I was one of their flag bearers, and they would invite groups and neighboring stakeholders onto the property to show their successes. Yeah, they had some dark times, but now look where we are now. You know, and we're proud to be a good, solid pillar of the community. Okay, they want to show off the site. There's nothing wrong with that. Responding to media inquiries, especially in the event of an event. Now, make sure that there are assigned persons or staff that are assigned to media inquiries. Okay, because you don't want a twist of words or the wrong message sent, or just make sure there's a chain of command that staff knows to follow when media is knocking on your door and would like a quote or an explanation of something. Okay, we even follow that here with the Department of Environmental Quality. Many time I was as an inspector, I would decline the interview. I was still caught on camera doing my job at whether it's a sampling event, what have you, but I knew better. Hey, you can talk to my supervisor as far as a media release, and there's no problems with them, filming me doing my job at that time on the site. I did it very well, thank you. but I was not in a position to speak to the media on certain things, nor really did I want to. So an inability to communicate effectively within the first few hours of an incident could seriously reduce the company's ability to control the situation. We have many examples of this. This will undermine the company's reputation in the minds of staff, customers, the media, the public. Effective energy management requires effective communications. Now, communications will help you motivate the workforce, right? Explain the energy management policy both internally and externally, and how it relates to the overall business vision and strategy. Ensure understanding of roles and expectations. Demonstrate management commitment. Oh, so important. Monitor performance and identify potential system improvements. Continual improvement, right? Oh, bummer. I felt like I was on a roll.
You were on a roll. You want to
Davey?
just keep going?
Yeah. It's yours, Davey.
All right, excellent. So 7.5 is all about documented information, which we started looking into yesterday. So the definition of documented information is information required to be controlled and maintained by an organization and the medium on which it is contained. So it can refer to the management system, whether that's your manual or your processes. It can refer to information created in order for the organization to operate. That's going to be your documentation, your SOPs, excuse me. And it can also be evidence of the results achieved, which are considered your records. You can go ahead to the next slide.
It's doing it again. Why is it? Let me try the clicker. Okay.
Excellent. So the annex has some more information about documented information. It says documented information replaces the nouns documentation, documents, and records in the previous version. And if you're familiar with any of the ISO standards, this documented information thing, it's pretty similar to any other management system that you'd have in place. And with the new version, this one's the 2018, they replaced all of those old words with the broad term of documented information. It does still kind of differentiate between what is considered a document in the old version and what would have been considered a record. But it does this by saying that some documented information must be retained. Those are going to be your records. And then some need to be maintained. Those are going to be things other than your records, your SOPs, that type of thing. I'm going to give you an example. In 6.3 that Angela talked about yesterday, the energy review, it says the organization shall maintain as documented information the methods and criteria used to develop the energy review. So maintained as documented information, that's going to be a document. It's going to be, your methodology, your SOP. But if that changes, if you start doing your energy review differently, you need to update that document to show that it's changed. Whereas it goes on to say that the organization shall retain as documented information the results. So that's something that is a record. It's ideally not going to change, but you need to retain it on file so that you can refer to it later. So for the 14,001 standard, the only difference is that it says as evidence of, that refers to a record. So if you're comparing the standards, retain and as evidence of are kind of the same thing. Okay, next slide. Excellent. So I'll go ahead and read the standard to you for documented information. As in the general, which is 571, the organization's ENMS shall include documented information as required by ISO 50001 and documented information determined by the organization as being necessary for the effectiveness of the ENMS and to demonstrate energy performance and improvement. So if there's something that you guys deem as an organization is necessary for your ENMS to function the way it should be, then that should also be maintained or retained. Okay, next slide. When creating and uploading, when creating and updating documented information, the organization shall ensure appropriate identification and description. So those are going to be your titles, your dates, your author, or your reference numbers. Ensure appropriate format, make sure it's in a language that people understand at your organization, whatever software version is up to date, the graphics, etc. And then also ensure appropriate media. Is it going to be paper or electronic? And then you also need to ensure that it is reviewed and approved for suitability and adequacy. So these documents are not just going to be kept in a drawer somewhere where you never look at them and never review them or change them. They need to reflect the things that you're actually doing at your in your organization, and they need to be updated as necessary. Okay, next slide. Okay, so this one's about control of documented information. Documented information requires the ENMS documented information required by the ENMS and the ISO 14,000, almost said 14,001, 50,001 shall be controlled to ensure it's available and suitable for use where and when needed, and it is adequately protected from loss of confidentiality, improper use, or loss of integrity. So I'm going to give you examples of two of these, or both of these rather. So if you have a significant energy user, excuse me, if you have a significant energy user and you have an SOP for that equipment, is that SOP being, is it available to the people who are using that equipment? Or is it stored behind lock and key and no one has access to it and no one has training on it? You want to make sure it's available to the people who need it. And then also, is it adequately protected? We have an organization in ESI who had a cyber attack, and they lost a lot of their information from their, this was an EMS. Luckily, they had a paper copy of their manual, so they were able to restore everything. But from now on, they have decided that even though they are fully electronic, they will always have a paper copy. Okay, next slide. Okay, for the control of documented information, the organization shall address the following activities as applicable: distribution, access, retrieval, and use; storage and preservation, including making sure that it's still legible; control of changes, for example, your version control or your revised at the bottom, and then your retention and disposal. Documented information of external origin determined by the organization to be necessary for the planning and operation of the ENMS shall be identified as appropriate and controlled. So an example of this might be an equipment manual that is a large energy user at your facility. That manual is obviously something that's external, but your ENMS might have decided that that is something that is necessary in order for your ENMS to function. And so you would want to identify that and control it as appropriate. Next slide. All right.
All right.
So now it's me. All right. So talking about operational planning and control now. So the organization shall plan, implement, and control the processes related to its significant energy users. Remember, we talked about significant energy users yesterday. For those of you in the 14,000 world, that's very similar to your significant aspects, except now we're talking about the significant energy users since we're talking about the energy standard. So anything that is needed for those significant energy users, you need to meet requirements and to implement the actions as determined in 6.2. And you do that by establishing criteria for the processes, including effective operations and maintenance of your facilities, equipment, systems, energy using processes. Anytime their absence can lead to a significant deviation from their intended performance. You need to communicate criteria to relevant persons doing work under the control of the organization, implementing control of the processes in accordance with the criteria, including operating and maintaining facilities, equipment, systems, and energy using processes in accordance with established criteria, and then keeping documented information to the extent necessary to have confidence that the processes have been carried out as planned. So if you define something as that significant energy user, then you have to control it. That's all this is saying. Control can mean work instructions, or it can mean software or other means of making sure that energy is being managed in a way to meet your goal of reducing your energy usage. You have to set the operating parameters, including maintenance requirements, in order to work toward those goals that you've set. And you also need to make sure that people who can affect the equipment or the controls know about those parameters, such that they don't make adjustments that counteract your purpose. All right, next. The organization shall control planned changes and review the consequences of unintended changes, taking actions to mitigate any adverse effects as necessary. So if you know a change is coming, then you need to make sure that the energy usage is considered in the planning process and controlled throughout that change. If a change occurs that isn't planned, then you should be sure to reduce the impacts as much as possible and control the process if it's going to be something that you've implemented and will be continuing. And then the organization shall ensure the outsourced SEUs, or significant energy users, or processes related to those significant energy users are controlled. So any energy usage by contractors or other outside equipment that you've had to bring in for one reason or another, that might be considered significant, or is related to something that is already significant, must be controlled, as they too will contribute to your energy usage. Right. So for example, if you have a motor that goes down, and right now with the way the supply chain is, you may not be able to find another motor that is a like-for-like replacement, or even one that's more efficient. So you might have to go with a motor that is more, that uses more energy, just to get your line back up and running. We all know that production is the king when it comes to getting things done. So if you have to implement something that is a higher energy demand, then you need to make sure that you're controlling it as much as possible, and then make sure that that is also on your list of things to improve once either you have the availability or the finances or whatever is necessary to be able to work on that. So just keep that in mind when you have changes. And then as far as having a contractor or an outside piece of equipment, maybe you lose you lose power for some reason. There's a big storm or something, and your generator isn't big enough to run your entire plant. Maybe you have a generator, but it's just there for like peak shaving or something, and it doesn't, run the entire facility. So maybe you'll have to bring in a bigger generator, which might use more fuel. So again, you have this outside piece of equipment that would be considered significant, that you need to have some sort of control when you're implementing that. So just think about those kinds of things when you are putting operational controls into place. All right, next. All right, so design. I find it interesting that they put design here, because if you remember yesterday, we talked about the plan, do, check, act system, and we talked all about planning yesterday. And for some reason, design is not in the planning section. Design is in the do section. So that's neither here nor there. It's where it is in the standard, so we'll talk about it now. But here it says 8.2, the organization shall consider energy performance improvement opportunities and operational control in the design of new, modified and renovated facilities, equipment, systems, and energy using processes that have a significant impact on energy performance over the planned or expected operating lifetime. And where applicable, the results of your energy performance consideration shall be incorporated into specification, design, and procurement activities. The organization shall retain documented information of the design activities related to energy performance. So basically what this is saying is that for anything new, be it a construction project, a new product line, or a new piece of equipment, you should consider the energy impacts during the earliest stage that you can. If you reduce your energy impact potential before it is implemented, then you'll be better off in the end. All right, next. All right, then once you've designed and decided what you're going to do, you have to procure it, right? So the organization shall establish and implement criteria for evaluating energy performance over the planned or expected operating lifetime when procuring energy using products. So that means you just need to think about it for the long term. You're not talking about just, what it's going to cost you right up front. How much is it going to cost you in both money and energy down the road? Equipment and services which are expected to have a significant impact on the organization's energy performance. So any of that stuff, you need to do this procurement process. When procuring energy using products, equipment, and services that have or can have an impact on significant energy users, then the organization shall inform suppliers that energy performance is one of your evaluation criteria for procurement. That's a shall. You have to tell, it's got to be part of your request for a quote, right? That you are looking at for energy performance. Where applicable, the organization shall define and communicate specifications for ensuring the energy performance of procured equipment and services and the purchase of energy. So you can incorporate policies like purchasing Energy Star rated office equipment, designing new buildings to meet LEED or Energy Star requirements, even if you don't go for the certification itself, or including energy usage, excuse me, Davey, it's catching. Or including energy usage and tracking devices as part of the decision criteria when you're putting equipment out for quotes. And you also have to let your suppliers know about those requirements, like I mentioned, because they may actually have more efficient equipment that they can quote on that you may not be aware of. So, it never hurts to ask. And not only does it never hurt to ask, but this says you shall let them know about those requirements. So it's really prescriptive there, which is a challenge for some. So that's it. So, Don?
All right, I'm back up. Any questions thus far? If so, feel free to send them our way. Otherwise, we shall continue.
Yeah,
We'll
feel
go
free to
into-
type questions in anytime. You don't have to wait for us to have a break. As soon as you have a question, type it in. Sorry.
So we are going to venture into performance evaluation. Now, the emphasis is on evaluating energy performance and the energy management system. This section also explains requirements for internal auditing and gives a detailed explanation of the management review. So ISO 50001 9.1 focuses on elements of the energy management system that need to be monitored, measured, analyzed, and evaluated, and when these procedures should be carried out. So any significant deviations in energy performance should be investigated and responded to. Compliance with legal and other requirements should also be evaluated. So any significant deviations in energy performance, again, should be investigated and responded to. Compliance with legal and other requirements should be evaluated. I stress that, so you don't want this catching up to you and giving you an unwelcome surprise. Now, the organization shall determine for energy performance and the energy management system, wherein what needs to be monitored and measured, including at a minimum the following key characteristics: the effectiveness of the action plans and achieving objectives and energy targets, your energy performance indicators, your ENPIs that we've been speaking about for 2 days now, your operation of significant energy uses, as Angela just mentioned, your SEUs. How about your actual versus expected energy consumption? Now, the methods for monitoring, measurement, analysis, and evaluation to ensure we get valid, repeatable, and reliable results. Okay, so I believe it was Angela or Davey, but I think it was Angela's yesterday. See, this kind of speaks volumes on calibration, does it not? We know this isn't 14,001, but in 50,001 is speak about that. So consider that, okay? Repeatable and reliable results. It's all about justification. Now, just as a reminder on your energy performance indicator, we've talked about it yesterday and a little bit today, but I'd like to go over it again for you, for those that aren't as familiar with it. It is a measure of energy intensity used to gauge the effectiveness of your energy management efforts. The ENPI is a regression analysis tool developed by the U.S. Department of Energy to help managers normalize baseline of energy consumption. It is used to track annual improvements, energy savings, and your superior energy performance, okay, your SEP. And again, as a reminder, your significant energy use, your SEU, is a key concept within 50001 and is defined as energy use accounting for substantial energy consumption and or offering considerable potential for energy performance improvement. So significant criteria are determined by the organization. SEUs can be facilities, systems, process, or equipment. And finally, the effectiveness of the ENMS can be demonstrated by improvement in your energy performance and other intended outcomes. Energy performance improvement can be demonstrated by improvements in the ENPI values over time relative to the corresponding energy baseline, your ENB. There can be a situation where energy performance improvement is achieved from an activity that is not related to an SEU or a key characteristic. In those instances, your ENPI and your energy baseline can be established to demonstrate energy performance improvement. So this will now allow you to determine when monitoring a measurement shall, as required by the standard, shall be performed, and when the results from monitoring a measurement shall be analyzed and evaluated. Now, the final step is to evaluate data created from the implementation of the energy data collection plan with a view to drawing a conclusion on energy performance and the effectiveness of the energy management system, as stated in 6.6. And most importantly and critical to ensuring the ability to demonstrate continual improvement is the need to confirm that improvement in energy performance has been evaluated by comparing your energy performance indicator values, as in 6.4, against the corresponding baselines, as in 6.5. Now here's a nice little graphic showing this relationship between your energy performance, your ENPIs, your energy baselines, and your energy targets, okay? Your energy performance includes your energy consumption, your energy usage, energy efficiency, okay? You have a reference for your ENPI value, your baseline period, your current ENPI value or your reporting period, and you see your target, your energy target, right? And of course, your improvement. Right? Is your target achieved? Okay, it's a great tool to consider. Now, we could actually talk about this all day long. First time last year when I was researching this, wow, it went on forever. And there's a lot of information out there for you to consider on this. In fact, the ENPI is a regression analysis-based tool developed by the U.S. Department of Energy's Advanced Manufacturing Office, the AMO. The tool applies to businesses, whether in the manufacturing sector, commercial buildings, federal agencies, data centers, or beyond. So it can help plant and corporate managers that use this tool to establish a normalized baseline of energy consumption, calculate ENPIs that account for variations, including due to weather, production, or other variables. It will help you track annual progress of intensity improvements and energy savings. It can calculate cost savings and avoided CO2 emissions. And it can help calculate metrics for a single facility, multiple facilities within a corporation, or enterprise-wide. So it's a great tool to consider. And again, that's put out by the U.S. Department of Energy's Advanced Manufacturing Office, the AMO. Is their tool specifically for your ENPI. Now, 9.1.2, evaluation of compliance with legal requirements and other requirements. So at plan intervals, the organization shall evaluate compliance with legal and other requirements stated in 4.2 related to its energy efficiency, energy use, energy consumption, and the energy management system. Also stated, the organization shall retain documented information on the results of the evaluation of compliance and any actions taken. So as in any case with an ISO, many of the ISOs, including 14001, an organization has to evaluate and document the result of compliance with its legal requirements pertaining to energy efficiency, use, consumption, and the energy management system, and any other related energy requirements that your organization treats in the same way as legislation. In practice, the range of scope of energy-related legislation that can impact an organization can be limited in number. Essentially, a list of appropriate legal and other requirements can be compiled. Then an organization can determine if compliance is being achieved by sampling appropriate evidence. Now, in many organizations, this will entail an audit, okay, perhaps annually, to determine that the specific legal and other requirements are being met. And the result of such an audit will establish the compliance status. If you choose to do this internally, again, it's up to you to determine that audit schedule. So once you have determined your compliance obligation, now you must evaluate your compliance. Here you must plan and implement a process to evaluate if you meet the legal requirements that are applicable to you as determined. This process needs to include the frequency of compliance evaluation. How often are you going to check to see if you meet the requirements of a particular legislation? Will vary from law to law, but your process needs to determine how often you will check each level of compliance. For example, you may need to continually check the concentration of chemicals you are emitting into the wastewater system, but you may only need to periodically check on how well you are diverting recycling from your landfill waste. So evaluate compliance and take action. This is the step that everyone thinks about when it comes to the requirements of legal compliance. And this requirement has not changed. As an organization, you need to make an assessment against the applicable laws to see if you meet the requirements and take any actions necessary to become compliant if you are not. Okay, so keep up to date with rules and regulations year in, year out. With that, maintain the status of your compliance. In other words, always know if you actually comply with your legal requirements. If a law changes, rules and regs change, you need to know about it, and you need to know if the change affects your compliance with that law. If you make a change in your facility, you may need to evaluate whether you still obey all the laws. Are your permits up to date? Are revisions needed? Okay, and this both during and after the change. Even if you are not yet set to evaluate this according to your regular schedule. Be flexible, right? Again, keep up with changing rules and regulations. You hear us talk about this all the time in the 14001 standard. Angela?
All right. So like with all other management systems, wow, my mouth didn't want to work. We have to do internal audits with energy management systems. So the standard says the organization shall conduct internal audits of the ENMS at planned intervals to provide information on whether the ENMS improves your energy performance, conforms to the organization's own requirements for its ENMS policy, objectives, energy targets established by the organization, and the requirements of the ISO 50001 standard, and to make sure that it's effectively implemented and maintained. So internal audits of the ENMS can be performed by employees of the organization, or it can be by external persons selected by the organization and working on its behalf. Auditor independence can be demonstrated by an auditor being free from responsibility for the activity being audited. An energy audit or an energy assessment that we talked about yesterday is not the same concept as an internal audit of the ENMS. However, part of the internal audit of an energy management system must include a review of your actual performance. This is a little bit different from some of those other standards where basically you're just looking to see if you're meeting the standard and meeting your own requirements, right? This one specifically says that you have to audit your performance as well. So you need to know, is what you're doing actually having a positive effect? The audit must also review the system to see if it meets the requirements of the standard, and all the shall statements must be addressed. And it needs to review whether you are meeting the requirements that you set for yourself, like work instructions, procedures, schedules, training requirements, just to name a few things. All right, next slide. So the organization shall plan, establish, implement, and maintain an audit program, including the frequency of methods, responsibilities, planning requirements, and reporting, which shall take into consideration the importance of the processes concerned and the results of previous audits. You need to define your audit criteria and scope for each of these audits, select auditors and conduct audits to ensure objectivity and impartiality of the audit process, ensure that the results of the audits are reported to relevant management, take appropriate actions in accordance with 10.1 and 10.2. Those are your corrective action sections, and we're talking about those in a minute. And then retain documented information as evidence of the implementation of your audit program and your audit results. So basically, this element is all about planning for those audits. You need to set your frequency. You get to decide how often that happens, determine who your auditors are going to be, determine how you're going to document the results, and make sure that issues are addressed and reported to the appropriate managers. Next.
All right, I will take the baton. Let's roll into 9.3, management review. All right, a management review is a formal, structured meeting which involves top management and takes place at regular intervals throughout the year. They are a critical and required part of running an ISO certified management system. The purpose of a management review meeting is to review and evaluate the effectiveness of the energy management system, helping you to determine its continued suitability and adequacy. The management review does this by encouraging top management to consider the degree by which the ENMS achieves the expected results, meets the organization's requirements, functions in accordance with the established operating procedures and processes, and is capable of identifying non-conformities and monitoring subsequent corrective and preventative actions. A management review also ensures that all levels of management are made aware of any changes, updates, revisions to the day-to-day workings of the management system itself. And so as mentioned, the review should be carried out at planned intervals. It's up to you as to what those intervals are. And this includes the status of actions already agreed and any changes to internal and external issues relevant to the energy management system. The review should also take into account risks and opportunities, information on the ENMS performance, energy performance improvement, and the extent to which objectives and energy targets have been achieved. The output of the review should be an assessment of the effectiveness of the energy management system, actions to achieve objectives and implications for change to the ENMS, and business strategies. So 9.3.1, the standard states that top management shall review the organization's energy management system at planned intervals. Just stated that, right? This is to ensure its continuing suitability, adequacy, effectiveness, and the alignment with the strategic direction of your organization. The management review covers the entire scope of the ENMS, although not all elements of the ENMS need to be reviewed at once. The review process can take place over a period of time. Now, regarding the management review, the most wide-ranging and strategic evaluation performance is indeed this process, the management review process, the review must be carried out by top management and should essentially be based upon factual input generated by the ENMS in order to make recommendations and improvements going forward. These are your outputs. The standard is helpful in providing a framework of what a management review should entail. In 932, the standard states, management review shall include consideration of the status of actions from previous management reviews. What are those updates? Where do they stand? The changes in external and internal issues and the associated risk and opportunities that are relevant to the energy management system. Information on the ENMS performance, including trends such as nonconformities and corrective actions, monitoring and measurement results. How about audit results? Results of the evaluation of compliance with legal requirements and other requirements. And of course, opportunities for continual improvement, including those for competence and your overall energy policy. 933, we see the standard stating the energy performance inputs to management review shall include the extent to which objectives and energy targets have been met. Okay. Are they ongoing? Have they been met? Are we resetting? The energy performance and energy performance improvements based on monitoring and measurement results, including the energy performance indicators and the status of the action plans. Again, where do we stand on that? Have they been forgotten, fallen through the cracks? Have they been achieved? And if so, how? Let's share that information. Now, 934, the standard states the outputs of the management review shall include decisions related to continual improvement, opportunities, and any need for changes in the ENMS, including opportunities to improve energy performance. What are they? How have they been identified? The energy policy. Is it time for an update? Revisions. The energy performance indicators or energy baselines. Objectives. Oh, going back to the energy performance indicators and energy baselines. How's your new equipment come in handy? How about the energy toolkit that was loaned to you by the ESI? You know, where does that information go? What have you done with it? Okay. Objectives, energy targets, action plans or other elements of the energy management system, and actions to be taken if they are not achieved. Where do we go from there? How about opportunities to improve integration with business processes? The allocation of resources. Remember, we started off this session about proper resources being in place. The improvement of competence, awareness, and communication. Okay. The organization shall retain documented information as evidence of the results of management reviews. Now note, there's a difference between management meetings and management reviews. A management meeting may address the day-to-day working practices, sales, production, resources, staffing matters, but the management review focuses solely on the requirements of the energy management system, as described within your manual or your documented information. So the widest ranging and strategic evaluation of performance regarding this management review process, well, it must be carried out, as I stated, by top management. It should be essentially based upon factual input generated by your ENMS in order to make recommendations and improvements going forward, your outputs, as I mentioned. The standard is helpful in providing a framework of what a management review should entail, and is suggested that these headings are used in the documented information that is produced by an organization. These includes the status of action from previous management reviews, okay? There should be a summary of what extent previous management review actions have been carried out or not carried out, and the reasons why. Some organizations may produce a comparative table to show this. How about changes in your external and internal and associated risk and opportunities issues that are relevant to your energy management system? Changes in relation to external and internal issues should be explained. And information on the energy management system performance in general. Angela, back to you.
Okay, so we've gone through, if you remember the plan, do, check, act cycle, we've done plan yesterday. We did do with the operational control. We just did check with management review. So now we're going to act on all of those things that we have had suggestions on for improvement between the internal audits and the management review. So next slide. We have nonconformity and corrective action. So when a nonconformity is identified, the organization shall react to the nonconformity and as applicable, take action to control and correct it and deal with the consequences. So now remember that nonconformities are not necessarily noncompliances. This is where you are not meeting the standard, you are not meeting your personal requirements that you've set for yourself, you are not meeting your targets that you have set in your goals. So any of those could be considered a nonconformity in the ENMS. You need to evaluate the need for action to eliminate the cause of the nonconformity in order that it does not recur or occur elsewhere. And you do that by reviewing that nonconformity, determine the cause, and determine if similar nonconformities exist or can potentially occur. Then you need to implement any action needed, review the effectiveness of any corrective action that you actually took, and then make changes to the ENMS if necessary. This is about making sure that when things go wrong, you not only fix the problem, but you put systems in place to make sure it doesn't happen again, right? You really want to find that root cause. What is going to keep this from recurring? Next. Corrective action shall be appropriate to the effects of the encountered nonconformities, and the organization shall retain documented information of the nature of the nonconformity and the actions taken, as well as the results of your corrective action. So basically this is saying that you don't have to overcorrect. You want to make sure that the corrective actions that you are taking make sense for the severity of the issue that you have found, right? But you also don't want to underestimate things. You don't want to correct either. You want to make sure that you're giving the appropriate amount of attention to when things go wrong, right? And then, of course, you have to keep documented information because this will help those things from recurring too, especially if you go back and review your nonconformances now and then to make sure that what you did was effective and remains implemented. We have seen in the past in other management systems where, something they thought was corrected somehow over time slipped and they went back to doing things the old way, and then it got really close to an issue happening again before they realized that the actions that they put in place were not still being implemented. So just beware that you always need to make sure that what you've established to fix issues needs to be consistent and maintained over time. Next. Organizations shall continually improve the suitability, adequacy, and effectiveness of the ENMS, and the organization shall demonstrate continual energy performance improvement. So unlike other ISO management systems, this one actually has a performance function. You have to show that your energy demand is reducing. So that normalization is important in your production or building footprint or hours of operation, whatever it is that you're using to compare your energy to. Having that normalization factor is going to help you to show that progress when you are increasing production and yet keeping your energy the same. Well, if you weren't showing that increase in production, it would look like your energy was going up, right? So just keep in mind that this particular standard has a performance requirement that none of the other standards really do. So, all right, and that is it for the standard, folks. We made it through. We do want to give you a few resources here. We mentioned some of these yesterday. We've mentioned some of them today, but here you have some links and things. So first of all is the ISO 50001 gap analysis tool. That is in the handout section of the little GoToWebinar toolbar. This, like I said, was put together by one of our interns last year. It's based on our 14001 gap analysis tool. So basically it just goes through that standard. Anywhere there's a shall, it has a question for you. Have you done this? And then you can put in a yes, no, partial, and it will give you a visual table at the end to let you know kind of how far along you are in implementing the standard. We want to talk about the waste reduction partners. Again, these are a group of retired scientists and engineers. They are part of our division here, DEECS, but they offer energy, water, solid waste audits for members, as well as others who are interested in receiving those services. And they can, spend a little bit more time with you because they have a little bit more time on their hands, and they want to keep busy. They want to keep their brains active, and they want to return all of that great knowledge that they acquired over those years working in industry to help others to improve. So those folks are available to you anytime you need that. And like I said yesterday, they're really great about energy audits on the no cost, low cost kind of realm of things. The DOE, Department of Energy 50001 Ready Navigator tool. Again, this is kind of like it is a gap analysis tool as well. And you can see the link to that there. This tool, it kind of is a turbo taxi kind of thing, where it asks questions and you go through and you answer whether or not you've done it. It's a good way to keep you on track if you're trying to implement the tool. And if you get all the way through it and have everything complete, then should you decide to become third-party certified, then you should be ready to go. You should have all the pieces in place. Advanced Energy, I mentioned them yesterday. They actually have cohorts. They are one of 4 national ISO 50001 experts that were selected by the U.S. Department of Energy to provide step-by-step support to help your company achieve that 50001 ready. We offered a detailed training and assistance with process development and documentation on the 14,001 side. They do that for the 50,001. They've also supported several cohorts of organizations with training and assistance in the ISO 50001 Ready program, including several of our members who have gone through that program and spoke well of it. And then finally there you've got UNC Charlotte and Dr. Robert Cox. So the U.S. Department of Energy announced funding for a university-based industrial assessment center, which assists small and medium-sized manufacturers in reducing their carbon emissions and lowering energy costs while training the next generation of energy efficiency workers. And UNC Charlotte is one of the recipients of that grant. And so feel free to reach out to them for a little bit more in-depth look at your energy or potentially your carbon accounting, that kind of thing. And then we also have connections with Duke University, who is also involved in carbon accounting and trying to help folks that are getting into defining what your scope 1, 2, and 3 emissions may be. So if that's something you're interested in, reach out and we can connect you with them as well. So we have lots of opportunities for resources here. And then as Don mentioned, we're starting a energy toolkit that we can loan out. Don, did you want to talk any more about that?
Sure, I've got a quick pitch here. It's something that our P2 grant has allowed us to put together over the course of the last year or so. There were a few delays with the circuit board shortage that went across the country, but we finally have all the components in place. Let me just explain. And we hope to have it fully launched later this year. But in essence, the Energy Toolkit ESI has developed will allow clients to track energy usage and identify areas where pollution prevention strategies can be deployed to reduce your energy usage. Now, many of our ESI members have set aggressive energy goals to exceed or be on par with state, federal, or corporate energy management or carbon reduction targets. So the development and introduction of this ESI Energy Toolkit, which is energy monitoring equipment, will be valuable to those on the energy management strategy journey. With sub-meter data paired with experienced guidance, ESI members can reduce energy cost, air pollution, and overall increase your environmental resiliency. Not only will these actions lead toward pollution prevention, but they will also contribute to achievement of the North Carolina Department of Environmental Quality's Clean Energy Plan and NC Executive Order 80. So again, some of the equipment we have is and I'm not going to mention it all because the list is pretty long, but we have a Dent Elite Pro XC portable power meter and data loggers. We have what I've been showing off during this presentation is a FLIR E4 thermal imager. We have a Bacharach 1100 compressed air leak detector, and it goes on and on. And again, we're actually taking this to a site visit tomorrow at Thomas Built Buses for an auditing training class. I'll have another, and we hope to have it on display at the ESI annual conference later this year. So we will make sure everybody is aware when we're ready to fully launch. You'll be able to check this equipment out and go to work. And if you need some additional training on it, hopefully we can provide that. We're also looking at some training for our own ESI staff as well, especially on the newer equipment that we might not be as familiar with. Like I said, for an example, a Bacharach leak detector, I've got plenty of experience with, but with a model that was put out 18 years ago, nothing like the critter that I saw in our toolkit now. So I'm excited to learn about that. Again, these all have a lot of the equipment we're using. You can upload your data, then download them into a database instead of just standing there and handing out writing out the data line by line like I used to do. So we're excited to offer this to our ESI members, and hope you look into it.
All right. So I think that's it. Does anyone have any questions at all? Not seeing any popping up. How about you guys?
Nope, not seeing any.
Okay.
All right. Well,
Yeah.
if you guys have any questions in the future, feel free to email any of us and let us know. And we will get back with you with answers as quickly as we can. If you want to be connected with any of these folks on the slide or with Duke University, who will be helping with the carbon accounting stuff, please let us know that too. We'd be happy to connect you with that and participate if possible on those discussions. So other than that, if there are no additional questions, then we'll say thank you. Thank you for attending yesterday and or today. Please let us know how we can help you achieve your environmental goals. Talk to you soon. Bye-bye.
Take care.